Hi, I'm Rachel Norm, and I'm doing a presentation on technology integration, comparing what it is and what it is not. To begin with, we're going to look at what technology integration is, and I have these 5 different points here on the screen, and we're going to go through them one by one. The first one is that it transforms what the classroom is and what you can do in the classroom. This is really important because you don't want your students to never see technology be used, but you also don't want to be on the other extreme of them always looking at their screens and being distracted. These are the two extremes that we have with technology. With technology integration, it helps run the class with norms, procedures, and routines that the student come familiar with. And a good example of this is you can bring in weather websites and apps for the students to explore in the morning routines rather than just showing it to them. And this is important because then the students can really explore the technology for themselves rather than giving it to them as the teacher. And it also allows them to become familiar with those procedures and routines that you have put in place with technology. The second point is using resources that you have to the best of your own abilities. I heard this quote from the camp counselor that I had worked for where he said, "Facilities facilitate." And what this means is that we don't have the facilities controlling what we do, but we control how the facilities can help what we are trying to accomplish. A second point I have is that to not give up of understanding technology that you want to have in the classroom, but persevere and learn how to use it at your own pace so that you can do that intentionally and successfully. Your abilities allow you to incorporate what you know you can use in the classroom, and you should start where you're at and expand from there. How you can do this is by preparing yourself with what technology you do have in the classroom by getting to know it and become familiar with it. And the examples I have listed are Palm Pilots, iPads, and interactive projectors. Get to know the materials and the technologies that you want in your classroom prior to actually using it so that you're confident. The third point of what technology integration is that if you can use technology to make the lesson better, then use it as a tool. One thing that's important to remember is that lessons did not always have technology, and it can be done well without technology. But if it can be done better with technology and the students can learn more from the use of technology, then it's good to incorporate it into the lesson so that they're comfortable with that technology that you wanted specifically and intentionally in that lesson. An example of this would be a science lesson about the constellations. You can easily have constellations printed out on a piece of paper with a specific day. But something that would be so much better for them is actually using a computer with some sort of simulation that allows them to choose a day with the constellations in the sky instead of it being given to them on a piece of paper that they could have easily printed out on their own, but rather a simulation engages that higher order thinking and they can even customize it to whatever location and day that they choose. Our fourth point is that it gives the students ownership of their learning. Students can use their own creativity and imagination with technology in the classroom. If you think about doodling and those students that doodle either to help them to pay attention better or maybe it's because they're bored, they can still have their personalities come out through the use of technology that you grant to them. So something that they could have done with that constellation project is instead use images instead of the stars to make those constellations so that they can personalize it to their own personalities. For example, on that bottom right picture that I have on the slide here, there are different icons, and students can choose their own icons instead of little stars to make constellations to bring out their personalities and their own interests in their own learning. My final point is that students can learn at their own pace rather than all staying together. If you think about the tests that students take and they get all these different grades, the teacher doesn't always reteach the lesson based on 1 or 2 students that didn't understand the material. But rather, technology, when used in a lesson, can help the students to grow their learning slowly. And a good example of this that I thought of was giving directions to the students on either a piece of paper or on the front of the classroom where if they're exploring a new website, you can have all of the directions listed out and then the student can go at their own pace to understand it for themselves. If you think about the tortoise and the hare, the tortoise obviously goes slower, but he still wins the race. The rabbit also goes his own pace, but he's tuckered out. Now, some people can go as fast as the rabbit and be just fine, but for those who are like the rabbit and get tuckered out so easily, they might need to focus on being more of a tortoise so that they can stress-free enjoy their learning at their own pace. Now we're going to talk about what technology integration is not. And I have these 5 different points that I'll go through one at a time and give them what they need for their explanation. So the first point is that it is not an accessory to the learning. It is, when you think about winter, you wear a winter coat. But when it comes to summer, then you aren't wearing that winter coat. So it is an accessory to an extent. When you're outside, it's not an accessory, but it's part of your outfit. So an example that I thought of was using weather websites and apps to add to the learning when the students explore them with their peers. Showing them the same website each day at the front of the class is not benefiting their learning because you're giving them knowledge. And if you use that same website every single day, then it gets redundant. And so if they have time with their peers to explore different websites each day, they are learning skills with technology and about the weather and how to work together with their peers. Our second point is the random use of technology that is rare. This is where the students don't see technology as often as they should with their hands. They might see projectors being used every single day and the teacher being on their computer, but really the only technology they have would be phones at home, computers at home, video games at home, etc. So this is not how we want our classrooms to be if we want to be technology integrated. An example, a bad example actually, would be an experience that I had where about once a month we would rent out a laptop cart from the library and we would write one paper. And that is all that we really did for that class, rather than using simulations and exploring other websites and researching for these papers. We didn't do that on a daily basis, but on a monthly basis, which was too rare for that lesson. What we could do instead is bring it in every day rather than super rare and have it brought into each different subject and each different part of the day for slow integration, and then we can, I guess, dive in with a lot more of the technology in the classroom when the students are comfortable and when the teacher is comfortable, of course. Our next point is that technology will not become the teacher. Technology is never, hopefully, going to be the teacher. It's not supposed to be used to give the knowledge and the content to the students, but to be enhancing their learning of the content that has been learned. So a bad example of this would be when the teacher uses a website that either lectures through a video to the student or that the student acquires content solely from technology. But a good example would be when the teacher teaches the lesson and then uses technology to nurture the student's learning process and help them to better understand the content, not to give them the content. So our next point is that it is not giving lower order thinking to the students. It's not just click here, click here, click here, click there, but it's actually supposed to be educational. When students simply click all day long, they may not learn anything, because many educational gaming websites have this feature of just click, 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 but the clicking needs to be meaningful. So a bad example of this would be clicking the matching vocabulary of a solid H2O molecule, which would be ice, with the corresponding image that has the fastest moving atoms. Rather, a better example would be for the students to change the speed of the atoms for the H2O in a simulation using their mouse. This way they can predict if it's going to be solid, liquid, gas, or whatever the simulation is having them do, instead of clicking and matching. So our final point here is that it is not individuals working alone. Students can work together and use technology. Wait, what? Yes, you heard me right. They can work collaboratively on one device or through multiple devices, such as through Google Apps and other ways of sharing an app or some sort of website together that is working together. And students can learn from each other in this way. So a bad example of this would be when students work alone in silence in a science simulation on their screens that can easily be changed. So how it would be good is if a student works in a group and works together with other peers on the same laptop in the same simulation, talking about what's happening, predicting out loud what is going to happen, and thinking out loud with each other rather than sitting in super silence, which would be so frustrating when you get stuck. And I know I've been stuck, and it cannot be good for the learning to just sit there and have a meltdown, an internal meltdown. So there you have it. Now you know what technology integration is and what it is not, and how to focus on using technology in an intentional way and making sure that you're comfortable and the students are comfortable so that they can have their own ownership, use their own creativity, and using what you have and thriving with it rather than keeping it rare and sporadic and having it do all of the work and you're just there watching the students in silence, clicking away with their mouses.